SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy. My name is Todd Kirk. I'm your host. This is the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. And today we are joined by my fabulous co-host, Casey Trujillo. Casey, I am so pumped for today's episode. I can't wait for this discussion.
Todd, let's just if we could put an explicit warning on this episode, because we're going to get real in this one. I hope that people are prepared mentally to accept this challenging way of thinking, because it's going to be a different way of thinking than what you're used to. I read all sorts of different posts on the different customer success, customer leadership, like LinkedIn or communities. We're going to challenge the status quo today. So I just want to put an explicit warning today, Todd. And if anybody has negative comments, please direct them towards you.
Oh, okay, good. Well, that's good. When it comes to like bad words, I only know things like, frick and, like shut up and stupid.
Okay, let's calm it down.
I spend all my time with like my kids are 10 or younger, so I don't really have a lot of explicit language in my life. But Casey, I don't want to have to censor you, so I'll try not to today.
Well, Todd, I'm gonna. This is just a totally side note. This is my shout out to my friends at Gong. So if you don't utilize Gong, I would highly recommend you go take a look at it. Gong is an AI recording software, so it records your calls, but then tries to give you analytics and insights. They just came out with one, Todd, that they said if your customer feels comfortable enough to swear in the call, and you also swear with them, that the likelihood of closing that deal is 50% higher than if both people don't swear, but they need to start the swearing first. Now, I've taken us down a rabbit hole. Let's get us back on something, but
hold on.
Amazing insights.
I promise you, I will figure out a way to have this connect, but that is fascinating. You know how much I love data. You can't just throw that little tidbit out there. Oh, that's so cool. Good news is, what does that say though? It means you have permission to say cuss words on a call with a customer, but only if they do it first.
Yeah, they have to start.
But I mean, that just goes back to like sales 101, right? It's about it's the matching principle. If they cuss, they want you to match their energy. They want you to match their tone. So that's just evidence that you need to learn how to match, which is good. So,
I love it.
So Casey, on that point, one of the things that has been top of mind for me a lot, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this recently, and that is that I keep wondering if we need to think differently about how CS approaches their customer interactions. Yeah. And you've been in this world for a long time, and there's this common idea of building out a playbook, which steals from a sports analogy of, a coach is going to run plays, and then you as a player are going to go, run those plays. And so customer success generally runs a playbook. And today we're going to talk about playbooks. Why are they good? Why are they bad? What makes them work? What makes them ineffective? And, I'm pumped to dive in. So Casey, from your perspective, how do you know if we're doing it right or wrong? Like what do you think is something that people should be thinking about anytime the word playbook comes up?
Well, Todd, you know me, I like to start with stories. So I believe in the phrase that was coined that experience is the best teacher. That was actually wrong. That's a wrong phrase, because if I continually commit the same errors, then I didn't learn from experience. Experience didn't teach me anything, right? It's the ability to learn from experience and to change the way that I'm working makes experience the best teacher. But to experience the same thing over and over and over again, you're just in a drama triangle, right? So I want us to learn from Reid Hastings. Reid Hoffman and Reid Hastings had this exchange on Masters of Scale. It's a fantastic
LinkedIn and Netflix co-founders. Well, they were not of each other's businesses, but they were startup founders of two very famous different businesses. Yeah.
Right. Go and listen to that episode, because Reid Hastings, you know the story about how he walks in and Blockbuster's like, hey, we ever want to make a change, we'll just buy you, right? and Reed Hastings does all these amazing things, and they make Netflix successful. That's the story everyone knows, but nobody really understands the story behind the story. And Reed Hastings, the co-founder and CEO of Netflix, tells this story about one of the first organizations that he was CEO of called Pure Software. And as he was working with Pure Software, he said he basically put them out of business, he himself. And I want to read from the transcript of this podcast in what he said, because it was so amazing in what he was talking about. And he said, okay, so at Pure Software, every time we had a significant error, sales calls didn't go well, bug in the code, we try to think about it in terms of what process, or I'm going to substitute, what playbook could we put in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again, and thereby improving the company. And what we failed to understand is by dummy proofing all the systems, that we would have a system where only dummies wanted to work there, which was exactly what happened. And so the average intellectual level fell. And then the market changed, and we were unable to adopt to it because we had a bunch of people who valued following the process or playbook rather than the first principle thinking. That to me is the danger of playbooks, is where we walk in and we believe that the playbook is the answer. And two things take place. Number one, how do we even know if the playbook's actually going to work all the way, right? Number two, if I'm the CS person and I follow the playbook and it doesn't work out to the benefit that I wanted, what do? I blame my leadership. I blame the playbook. Because number three, I remove myself from having any accountability inside of that because I didn't come up with the playbook. And so as our customer needs change, well, that's not in the playbook. So I don't actually listen to my customer. I follow the playbook. So I think there is a true principle behind a playbook. I'm not disagreeing with a playbook. What I'm saying is we're overemphasizing the playbook and taking out the first principle thinking of the playbook. Todd, can you do a Todd bot and help us simplify what I was just explaining there? How would you reinterpret that information?
So the way I would hear, or so I started with this whole idea of the sports analogy. And if anybody knows me, I'm so good at all the sports ball references. I really know my sports. Actually, it's the worst part about traveling with Casey is I always feel like he wants to talk about basketball or something. And he always can way outdo me when it comes to sports knowledge. So I always feel like a dummy, but playbook is a sports term. So for me, the way I would simplify it is I would say playbooks work when they are for players. But what is the role of a CSM supposed to be? So I think we sometimes run into this place. Is your employee, is the person who is responsible for the process, is their job supposed to be a player, or is their job supposed to be a leader or a coach? Leaders and coaches, their job is to figure out strategically what are the right decisions. And the player's job is usually to figure out how to work within that system to execute it really well. So for a SaaS company, though, it's a new world. It's a new and evolving space. And so if you set processes too firmly and too strongly in the beginning, it puts all of the accountability on the coach or the leader who is responsible. Just like, the one thing I do know about football is how quickly coaches get fired and turned over. They're the ones who ultimately are going to get the blame. So the real question is, what is the role of the CSM? Is their job to be a player or a coach? And I think that's the thing that jumps out to me. So what is your take on that there, Casey?
Yeah. And Todd, we had this discussion you're going to see in the upcoming podcast with Jason Noble and Jason Whitehead. They run a podcast called The Jasons. And we had this wonderful discussion. And Todd, I think you shed some light on something that I've always been talking about is I believe two things. One, I believe we put too much emphasis on the playbook. We do develop a bunch of people that don't understand first principle thinking. They lose the ability to listen to their customers and what they're doing. Number two, I even dislike the term customer success, because what we're saying to our customers, we're the one that owns your success. we're the ones that's going to go in and make every one of your users click on the right button so they actually utilize your software correctly. I don't even like the term customer success, to be honest, because we're telling our customer we're removing the accountability of the customer. So Todd, when we were having this four-way discussion, and you said, I think we've been doing it wrong. The customer success manager we've been viewing as the coach, the customer success team as the players, and then maybe even our customers as the opposing team. How do we beat the opposing team in the way they're
Right.
structured?
Right.
And you had that amazing insight to say, should the customer success team be the coaches? Shouldn't our customers be the players? And that was brilliant, Todd. I loved how you said that, because it really does help us understand that as a coach, if I'm seeing that the play that the player's running isn't the right one, I need to help them see that. I need to help them say, hey, are you seeing that something else is coming on the weak side, so we can prepare and look at that, right? And how do you suppose we should go about that? Because also the quarterback on the field might see something different than what I'm seeing up in the booth, right? There's a field of the game that I just can't have. So I thought that insight of the customer success should be the coach, the customer themselves, them and their licensed users should be the players. I love that, Todd.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to this is something, at least for me, you and I were just talking about this recently, but it's like maybe it is time to get rid of the term customer success, because it conveys the wrong message. It conveys the idea that the owner of success is the vendor, the SaaS company that's providing the solution, and the customer is that they can put all the blame back on the vendor if they fail, right? But the fact of the matter is like, no, you're the player. You got to figure this out. So I love that idea of making them feel like they're part of the same team rather than an opposing team. So I don't know, maybe our listeners can help us figure out how we rebrand it. But so here's the part that I think is interesting. So, one of the things that you just said that really caught my attention, Casey, is the fact that so often when you are thinking about the idea of a play, we assume that means that the player's job is to turn their brain off and only execute on exactly where they're supposed to run, exactly how they're supposed to throw the ball, quick the ball, But the fact of the matter is that sports is always you're reacting to what the other team is doing constantly. And so one of the things that maybe is hard about a playbook is a lot of times the way I see that implemented across different organizations is just the way you described it. It's a process. You're going to do, to get them to renew, you're going to do this, and this. To get the executive on the phone, you're going to do step 1, step 2, step 4. But that's not really how it should work. It should probably be almost more like an algorithm where you understand principles, and because your brain is engaged with those first principle ideas, then you know how to adjust and react when those things are presented to you. The best players in any sports team know how to read the field and then adjust to make the play work in the situation, right? So I guess from your perspective, what do we do because the idea of a playbook, I think, is going to be hard to get rid of, because so many people we're hungry for guidance and direction, and we always assume there's somebody out there who knows better than us. So like, what in your mind are the right elements to have a playbook that is good, that isn't just going to make a bunch of dummies want to work for you?
Okay. Todd, this might go a little long, so we want to break this up. We can, but I'm seeing that there's 3 important things to make a playbook successful. Okay, so number 1, and Mark Staggy at Avoma, actually a competitor to Gong, he talked about this on the podcast. He said, if you as a customer success leadership are not reviewing your team's calls, you're missing out on ability to help them become better coaches, right? Great coaches had great mentors, right? You look at this one, Todd, you'll resonate with. Lavelle Edwards was the head football coach at Brigham Young University. The discipleship from that coach, of an Andy Reid, of a Bill Belichick, all of them came from a phenomenal coach. So the first thing I would recommend out to our listeners is, if you are in some type of leadership position, you need to spend the time with your customer success team to coach your coaches, to help them understand what does it look like to become a coach. Okay, so that's principle number 1. Todd, I would give the feedback. Number 2, to make your playbook successful, You need to help your customer success team understand how to ask open-ended questions that are not trying to get your players to play in a specific way. Okay. So one of the things is you want the players to react to what's happening out on the field. You've taught them the principles, but they know how to react. You need to ask the right questions. This is something I always tell people. If someone comes to me and says, a customer and says, I don't believe we're getting the value out of the software that we paid for, my first question back is, so how are you going to fix that? I believe that the ownership of the return on investment of seeing the value lies with the person who bought it. And I don't know what your employees like. I don't know what your leadership is like. I don't know if you were able to install the software correctly. I really don't know, but I know that you know. And I need to ask questions to help the person on the other end really start to think through this, because they're extremely busy. We've already talked about this. The average organization has 187 different SaaS applications. The person you're talking to might be managing adoption for 5 or 6 of these applications. They might also be on the support team. They might also be doing some other full-time job. So they haven't actually put in the time to do the thought work. So questions need to be open-ended and make them reflect. Have you seen in small pockets success? Well, yeah, I've seen some of our employees have success, but such a small amount. Okay, so what was successful? What are they doing that's successful? Well, they're doing this and this and this with the software. Okay, why are they doing it, and how has this been successful? Like, have we been able to dig in with them? Because what we're looking for is, how do we repeat this success, right? I'm walking my person through, that customer, how to go and get scalable success. But they're going to know what the blockers are. They're going to know to accept it. Now, as a coach, though, I might also say, you remind me of another customer that I had. They were facing this issues. Does that sound familiar to you? Would it be okay for me to walk you through some of the things that they're doing, and would you be willing to try that? Well, yeah, I'd be willing. Okay, let me, in our next meeting, let's review this. Who on your end should you invite to this meeting? I always ask that question, because my point of contact might not be the one that can get this all done. And so they're going to say, oh, I need to invite so-and-so and so-and-so. Okay, great. Let's have them come. Or they might say, no, I got this, right? I'm always stress testing what's taken. So number 2, open-ended questions. You have to ask them. Number 3 is you need to talk about data all the time. Good, bad, okay, mediocre. You need to bring the insights of data. And I'm not just talking your product usage or their product usage. You need to bring insights, data from other customers, yourself with what you're doing with that customer. But for a playbook to run, I always think they has to have those 3 things. Coaches need to help other coaches. We need to make sure our customer success team is asking open-ended questions to empower the player, which is the customer. And then with the customer, we need to provide them with data so they can act upon the data. So Todd, those are the 3 things that I would recommend to help people in accomplishing their playbooks.
Yeah, I love that. Can I work through that backwards really quick?
Let's do it.
So, right, the way you set it up, number 1, mentorship and leadership. 2 is great question asking of your players. And number 3 is providing data to your players. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating there is, if you think about all of the best players in any professional sport, they're usually going to say the reason they love their coach is because their coaches knew how to help them get the most out of their own ability. They help them develop, they help them grow. And so why is data important? Because data helps the customer grow. And one of the biggest reasons why a customer, in this case, remember, the customer is the player. The reason they have a hard time with the CSM is because the CSM is wasting their time. That's just like a coach who doesn't give good feedback, that doesn't help them identify how to improve their game so they can be successful. So I think that one's really important. The second piece that I thought was really interesting is when I think about that same player analogy and you talk about asking open-ended questions, and you even use the example of who else do you need to bring. I think what's really important to be a good coach is that you have to know your players, and you have to know what your players' role is, and you have to know what your players are capable of. So open-ended questions are the way you get to know your players. And I think too often what you do is, like, for any company, you might have a basketball team of 5 5 players. You might have a football team of 11 players. You might have a rugby team of 15 players. Sorry, I said I didn't know sports very well, so now I had to get a little bit of proof points back to say at least I know how many players are on the field for different sports. But the point is that there are different roles within a player, and every organization has different roles. And you might have one point of contact who is in IT, but you're trying to ask them to do everything. And then as the player, start coaching everyone else. And I think that's an unfair expectation. So you need to be able to ensure you understand what are they trying to accomplish, what is their role, and who are the other players in the team that need to get involved so that they can be successful rather than putting it all on them. Could you imagine if like you're in football and you have the running back trying to tell the safety on the defense like how to do their job? Like that doesn't work. Right. So like that comes from the coach. The coach has to be able to do that. Don't ask an offensive player to go coach the defensive player. And that's oftentimes what we're doing in the org, and it makes it really, really difficult. So anyway, those were some of the things that came to me in that first one that you mentioned about mentorship. I think, where should that be coming from? That should be coming from the CSMs getting guidance from their leaders, but their leaders need to be getting guidance from other leaders. And, we need to start thinking more like coaches and not like players. So that I think is just such a good starting point here. If we're going to have good, effective playbooks, we got to think like coaches and not players.
Yeah, and Todd, sometimes I think that on podcasts or different, it can sound, hey, that theory sounds nice, but you're not in my shoes. I don't have those resources. We had one listener on the podcast that says they assign this to their CS team. They don't have that type of leadership to give them mentoring, so they're assigning out the podcast and asking everybody to listen to, and then the next week they discuss what they learned in the podcast. It could be a book club, like if you don't have the leadership to provide that guidance, start somewhere so that you're helping your people become open and curious, because that's what the playbook should actually help you to do. I mean, I remember the shock of, and I just went to Weber State University to play a slot receiver. And I'd played receiver my whole life, but it was just in high school. It was just in the junior high, right? So I go to college, they call the play, and I say, okay, I don't really understand what route I'm supposed to run. And they're like, well, what defense are they in? Oh, well, I think they're in a 2 deep zone. Well, okay, so then you're going to run this one. Well, what if they're man? Well, you're going to run this route. Well, what if they're in a 3 deep? Well, you're going to run this one. I had to know what defense they were. And depending on what defense, I had 4 different routes I could run. That's the purpose of a playbook, is to know, okay, which one would I suggest to the players to be able to run? So I love that concept. And I know we've been really heavy on sports, but the one thing I want to hit back to, Todd, is Dave Darrington. He's a consultant for customer education. And I loved how he started his conversation. He said, in customer education, we have too many people that are working on what they call vain metrics that are not really help the business, but it makes the person in customer education look good. And he says, you know why? The reason why people don't try to tie customer education to reducing support calls, or customer education to show the impact of product usage or renewals or upsells, is because it's hard. And all of us, we're natural people. We want the easy way, right? And I would like to challenge the people listening that are in customer success. The reason why you're relying on a playbook is because it's easy. It's easy to follow, and it's easy to blame, and it removes the accountability. Now, I'm not blaming you for taking that route, but what I want to challenge you to become is something that Adam Grant calls a disagreeable giver. These are people who enjoy conflict, who like to challenge the status quo, rock the boat, but are motivated to do so that the service of helping other people will make them more successful in achieving their goals and being part of a meaningful organizational goal. Can we be disagreeable givers? And if we come in with that type of mindset, it is a hard mindset to come into, and challenge the people playing the game, our customers that bought the software, and say, I don't think you're going to be successful because of the approach that you're taking. That's shocking for a customer success person to do that. But here is, again, my challenge, Todd. If an average organization is using 187 different applications, they're meeting with 187 different customer success managers. 187 success managers are probably following some type of playbook. You want to stand out? You want them to take your call. You want to get in front of the executive. You want your software to land and expand. You have to become a disagreeable giver.
Casey, I know that we've used the sports analogies really hard, so I'm going to give you an entirely different analogy
Let's do
because
it.
I was a theater kid growing
All
up.
right. I like this.
Okay. So as a theater kid, what do you do when you are doing a play? What's the playbook for a theater kid? It's the script, right?
Mm,
You're given a script, you're given lines that you're supposed to say. And what I think is really fascinating, if you're to think about it, if I'm just trying to make this accessible for
please.
the non-sports people of the world out there. If you're given a script as a player that you're supposed to run, even one of the things that I think is really fascinating is the audience understands and can identify authenticity right away. So if you are someone who is just delivering lines, reading lines, people see right through it. So one of the things that I think is really dangerous in a theater world, if you're trying to be an actor, as an example, is the best actors are the ones who make you believe that they are really that person.
Mm,
And if you are just a person who is delivering and reading lines, they can see through it. We as human beings have the ability we have a really strong BS meter. We can see through it right
right.
away. And so that's one of the things that I think is really fascinating. The other way you could think about this is, you mentioned the fact that a play in football, right? You might have 4 different options, and the best players are the ones who know how to make decisions on the field and adjust, rather than saying I run route A and I always do that no matter what the defense gives me. So I think that's really fascinating. But the same is true. And if I'm a theater kid, I have to memorize the lines. I got to learn the lines. I got to know the system. I got to know the product. I got to know what's supposed to happen. But I also can't just deliver it as if it is something external to me. I have to become that thing. And so I
Right.
think that's a really beautiful thing to remember. Like, we started with this whole thing of you got to be a coach. But if you want to be a player, if you want to be a really, really good player, maybe you're not ready to be that like awesome thought leader who's coming up with new systems. At least be so good that you embody that play and you understand and become that real thing, rather than just somebody who's following a process. Because that's why customers tune you out, is because they don't see you as somebody who's legitimate. You don't come across as somebody who's authentically competent and understands their craft. So I don't know. I just figured that's a helpful analogy to add in there too.
I think that's the most important analogy we could have came up with, Todd, because it is the intention behind which you are interacting with your customer that's most important. If you are there to help them be successful, if you are there because you're so excited about them being successful that you're going to disagree with them, they're going to feel that. They're going to know that. So as you're approaching your playbook, I'm not against it. I hope, and no one walks away saying Casey and Todd were saying you shouldn't have a playbook. You should. You want repeatable results. What we're asking you not to do is just be a robot, to just
Yeah.
repeat it, to
Please don't
really
turn off
sit
your
back.
brain.
Please
If you
don't
turn off
turn
your
off your
brain,
brain,
you're going to fail.
right? Sit back, think about what's going on. Is this the right play that you should be coaching your customer to use? Because it might not be. And don't be afraid of that. One of the most common things I hear from customer success is, how do I show to my customer that they got value out of our software? Why? That's asking a coach to go score a touchdown. It's not possible. The player scores the touchdown. The player shoots the basket. So you should be asking your customer, wow, as I'm looking at this data, I'm seeing a lot of things jump out of me. What's jumping out of you, Todd? They say something. Todd, why would you choose that? Todd, what value did we get out of that? Todd, with that value, did you go use that other time or money somewhere else? And what did you get out of that value because you saved value here? Does your leadership know all the things you just did and you accomplished? It's that simple. Of those 4 questions, please memorize that and go through that, because you start having those type of conversations with people, they get passionate about what you're doing because they bought your software for a reason. They identified the business outcome that they wanted. That was already done. They wouldn't have bought it if they didn't see it. Now you're just helping them, empowering them, deputizing them to go accomplish that. And at times you need to be that disagreeable giver to get them to that point.
So good, Casey. Well, you know how we like to end every one of these episodes, Casey.
Yes,
This
sir.
is SaaS therapy, brother. How are you going to change as a result of this discussion? What homework would you give our audience today?
The homework I would give to you is one that I loved that Airbnb talked about when the first founders were there. they avoided the temptation to try to scale at the beginning. They first said, okay, what is a level 1 type of experience with Airbnb? If someone was to give us a rating of a 1, what would that experience look like? And they actually walked themselves through what a level 1 experience would be like if you were interacting with Airbnb.
The bare
What would a
minimum
level
to
2
get paid. Yeah.
What's a level 2? What's a level 3? What's a level 4? And they walk themselves all the way up to a level 10. That, hey, when I walk into the Airbnb, and I did a beach resort. There's a bike sitting there for me. There's a list of their favorite restaurants and what they would recommend. There's maybe some snacks. There's some waters. He walked through what a level 10 experience would look like, and then that person would always have their bookings filled, and that they're loving it because they're making all this extra income. And they walked themselves through it and said, "Can we do it?" And then they did it, and people loved it. And then they said, "How do we create a playbook around this?" I would ask you to go back and review your playbook. Is it a level 10? Heck, is it a level 5? And really start to say, is this moving the needle? Or am I just following a process because that's what's easy to do? That would be my challenge. That would be my homework.
All right. Well, we hope everyone who listened today found value in this. Go engage your brain. Look and see if you've got the right plays and the right playbooks, and if you are acting appropriately as either the player or the coach. Everybody, awesome. Have a great week. Thanks so much, Casey, and everybody. We hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.